Swim check 1, 2. Bike check 1, 2. Run check 1, 2. I think we're ready. Let's try this. Welcome to the Try Beginner's Luck podcast, a podcast where we explore the sport of triathlon from a variety of perspectives to help beginner triathletes on their journey. I am your host, Mashonda Shines. Well, welcome back to another edition of Try Beginner's Luck. It's December. And if you remember last week, I said that the episode was going to air the week before Thanksgiving. I was wrong, y'all. I am so off with time that technically we are already in December, and that was our Thanksgiving edition. So I hope you had a really, really great Thanksgiving. So we're in December, still practicing gratitude and just being thankful. But you know, I think one of the things that I'm more appreciative of as of late, which I kind of shared my story last, is the gift of life and how it is truly a gift that we are here, that we get to breathe, that we get to do the things we do, and that we really get to try. I don't think it's by happenstance that triathlon is 3 different sports in one. I just don't think that that's I don't know what to say. I don't think that that's not a real thing or whatever. I'm getting kind of twisted. But what I will say is we get the opportunity to do this. And no matter whatever the outcome is or isn't, we still get the opportunity. And there are people who don't get to get the opportunity. And so we should really just come as a way of saying, wow, I get to be here. I'm going to take the day, take the moments that are given to me and make and maximize the best in them. With that said, I have pre-discussions sometimes with my guests, and we go in and we sometimes forget that we actually got to record a podcast. Well, that's what happened. So I'm talking with this gentleman, and I met him for the first time in California. But how I met him was wild because I saw him on the big screen at the opening ceremony for Ironman California. But I was in a text thread with him because we were on the same team, On Point Fitness. And I said, wait a minute, that's such and such. And I said, oh my goodness, because, you know, Black people, we stand out in this sport, period, right? And so when you see Black folks on the screen, you either know them or you are connected to them in some way, shape, or form or fashion. So this gentleman, we, again, hadn't met physically, I don't think, because we didn't meet until race day, like race morning, because my flight was delayed. I had a lot of different technical difficulties even getting out to California. And so I had a plan, but clearly there were some other plans that were in the making, and I didn't get to meet up with him prior. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ian. Well, I've already said his name. His name is Ian Williams, but his story shook me during the opening ceremony. And I said, oh my goodness, like, it's been 7 years since he's been participating in sport because he was sick, but then he was taking care of his wife. But that wasn't even the half of the story. So when I started to talk to him, and I have people do like a questionnaire, I found out he was initially injured in 2018 volunteering at a race. And from then on, just a progression of things happened that were out of his control. And I'm going to let him share his story. But when I tell you it's a powerful one, and you will see why like the gift of life is so special, and we get the opportunity to do this, you are in for an amazing show. But I'm excited that I get to welcome to the Try Beginner's Luck audience, Mr. Ian Williams. Ian, welcome to the Try Beginner's Luck podcast. How are you?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me here. Just to share and chat and tell my story. Doing well, doing well. Thank you.
Well, you have an incredibly powerful story. And that's kind of why we didn't get to start, quote unquote, on time,
Right.
because I was just like, Iron Man didn't even get the half of the story out. Like, this is such a powerful story. And when I said he was on the screen with someone else, he was on the screen with Coach Lloyd Henry. And you guys know Lloyd because he's been on the podcast before. He's a part of On Point Fitness. He's a part of the Ask a Coach, which you guys should go listen to on YouTube before we bring any more episodes out. Um, but he's a part of our team. And I said, wait a minute, not just one black man, but two black men. Like, it was just, we went
Right.
wild in the audience because we were like, wait a minute, we know them. And so to see you and to hear the story then, but to learn more about your story, and I just need you to talk. You tell us about your story. How did we get to this moment of you now completing an Ironman after 7 years? You completed an Ironman California after 7 years. Tell us
Mhm.
about your story.
Sure, sure. So, it's pretty interesting how I ended up in triathlon. I had been a runner for quite a number of years and, just really trying to get better, trying to get faster. Um, I believe it was in 2012. Um, my wife was interested uh in just running, just getting started. I think her goal was a 5K. So I knew Coach Lloyd through some friends who, we had a running group and I would see him periodically. So I knew he had a class. I think the goal was to run a 5K at the end. So I signed her up, kind of just to put the pressure on her a little bit. Um, and she was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" But I knew Lloyd would take good care of her. So anyway, she went to the class, and one day I went there. Um, I believe how it went is that Lloyd had talked her into joining him at the pool, with the On Point team, just to do tri training. So I went there because I had some time. And Coach Lloyd said to me, he says, "Hey man, when are you gonna join us?" And I'm like, "Nope, running is my thing. I'm not getting in this water." But he leaned on me a bit, and over a couple weeks, decided he got me in the water, and we decided that we were going to the first, I think the the goal race that On Point had was Nations Triathlon. So I was like, all right, he helped me train up to that, and that was my first try. It was at Nations um, in 2012. And I fell in love with triathlon, even though I was so slow in the water. My form was off, because I just couldn't quite get it with all the coaching that I did. But I knew that I loved the sport. Um, and something possessed me. I was like, you know what? Next year, which was 2013, I said, I want to do an Ironman. I just so fell in love with it. And, you know, Lloyd just helped that trajectory, over the next year. He said, you really should do, he advised me, to do some other races in between. But I know myself in that, and I didn't share this with him. I knew that if I did a half Ironman and I was really suffering mentally, I would have talked myself out of going the entire. So I know within my head that I had to, you know, just go there. So in 2013, I registered and it was Ironman Cozumel. And, that's how that Ironman journey started. Um, you know, um, and while I was training, this is where it gets really a little bit interesting, is that while I was training for Cozumel, Ironman released an inaugural race of Ironman Chattanooga. And and that was for 2014. So here I was registering for a second Ironman before I had raced the first one, not knowing how I was going to do because I was like, I got to go do this one. So, and that's how it kind of picked up. It was, first one was Cozumel, then I did Chattanooga, and I kept falling in love with it more and more. the anxiety was there, not knowing if I could complete the distance. But then the passion just grew, and then it was Louisville after that one, then Mont Tremblant, and then Los Cabos, and then that it was after Los Cabos, which was in 2017, that, as you had mentioned, in 2018, that it seems like things kind of started falling apart, from the health side of things. In 2018, actually, it was not a race that I was volunteering. I was volunteering. So where I worked, there was something called a day of service. So I was volunteering it was like at a Goodwill. And um, I was carrying, whatever they needed. I was carrying, I think, bed frames and hauling some trash. And somehow, I think the motion, I think, as triathletes and runners, we're so locked in and clipped in going this way. So those muscles, those lateral supporting muscles, I think weren't there for me. And um, I ended up, as my doctor described it, he said, destroying the disc between L5 and S1. Um, and it traveled, compressed the nerves in two places that I lost function of my right leg. I couldn't walk without it collapsing. And but the pain was some of the worst I've felt. There's a bit of a story there, but the long story is that they eventually got me into surgery. And when they removed it, the damage to the nerves were already done because they had allowed it to sit compressed for so long. Um, and it never recovered. I still have numbness in my right leg to this day. Um, but it's after going through physical therapy there, for that, and trying to heal up and learning to run again, one day soon. Um, my wife, I think, who I think we had some, we're having some side conversations about that. She had been dealing with renal failure. It was leading up. Her kidney was failing, and she was preparing the kids one day to go to work with me for take your kids to work day, and she collapsed on the floor. Her blood pressure was 245 over 135. Um, Unheard of numbers for blood pressure. And she just started seizing. She stopped breathing at that point. And I thought, as I was sharing with Iron Man also, is that I thought this was a day. We've had a long history of her not being well and had her emergencies. But at this point, I hadn't even dialed 911 to get help. So, and here we are. We live on a busy street, 7 a.m. in the morning, traffic. How are they going to get to us? So I made the call. I remember just yelling to them on the phone because, they were asking a ton of questions, and I just sent the emergency, services over, the ambulance. And they had me start chest compressions on her. So, I began doing that. They talk you through it. And um, at the time the kids are screaming, it was just chaos in this house. They came, they got her, and fortunately she was in the ICU, but she was able to recover. So, while she was, and Michelle, you stop me at any time, because this story, there's just so much here.
I am I don't really know what to say and how to stop you because I think it's such a buildup, and the events that have happened were kind of like back to back,
Yeah,
and you're injured, you're sick, and now your wife is sick. And so it's
right,
like, goodness, like I'm not
right,
trained, I can't do any of these things. And I'm just thinking of
right.
like I don't get stopped a lot, and I'm not a woman that doesn't have a lot of words. Like I know how to use my words, but I think I'm just in awe because it's like, how did you move forward? Like, what was next?
So, we we were looking for and hoping that she could get so at this point it was determined that her kidney had ultimately failed. And we were hoping that she could get a donated kidney from a cadaver or or by some other means. The reason is that at the time we had three small children, and one of them was is on the autism spectrum, nonverbal, low functioning. So, having um, both parents, at risk, possibly medical risk, it's not something that we wanted to do. But as we knew from in the past, so there's a whole, like you and I have chatted, there's a whole separate story behind this, but this is actually her third um, uh, transplant, um, because of, and there's some, like I said, some other issues that kind of stemmed around that piece. But we know from history that she does not do well on dialysis. Every time that she's on dialysis, she suffers heart issues, some being she's had a heart attack. There's just something about the dialysis machine that pushes her heart too hard. So we already knew that she would need a kidney very soon, or we weren't quite sure how this was going to turn out for her. Um, I got tested, and they said to me, "You're not a match. However, George Washington University Hospital has a new program that doesn't require for you to be a match." And I thought, hold on a second, why is it only GW is doing this? Why isn't Hopkins, the more senior program, Georgetown? So I was very skeptical. But I knew, it's one of those where the clock is ticking over here, so you can't stay too long, in deciding. So um, I went through the testing process, and it is one that is very extreme. It is hard. It's emotional. I've even shared that you have to love the person that you're doing this for, because it is physically, mentally, psychologically, it's very tough. They're hard on you. Um, Also, I think because to ensure that you truly want to do this. So anyway, got tested. They I went through their program, where they prepare her body. They brought her into the hospital, and for 7 days they removed the antibodies, to prevent the rejection since we weren't a match. And interestingly enough, November 27th, 2018 was the day of the surgery. So it was right around Thanksgiving time, this time of year. So we're about to come up on that 6-year anniversary of donating, probably in 2 days from now. So, um, so I went in, prayed, lots of prayer going up, um, that just for protection, we had to also put some things in place, uh, just to ensure for the worst, for the children, that God forbid we didn't make it, one of us didn't make it, especially for our youngest, um, his care, support, all of these things. So, you're dealing with going on the operating table, both parents. But you have to pull yourself together and said, all right, we also have to plan for the worst, you know. And thank God, it went well, because th- they had some trouble waking me up from the surgery. But I'm just grateful. It's something that as you mentioned in the Iron Man story, I kept saying that there's a reason why I was mentioning how grateful I am. And people may say that it was an overused word, but it's because there is so much gratitude um, that I have experienced just through this entire journey for me to be standing there. Um, yeah, but So we did the transplant. For her, there were a little bit of complications, which we expect because it's always seems to always be the case with her medical journey. Um, but in addition now to all of this that was going on, um, in just about 6 months later, I traveled to Florida for a friend's funeral. And on the way back, I got off the plane, got home, and I said, I feel like I can't breathe. Something isn't right here. So, but after all, I'm like, hey, I'm a multi Iron Man. I'm strong, all of this stuff. Roxanne kept encouraging me. She said, hey, go get checked out. Because one of the great things about GW is that when you donate, you have this tremendous access to the medical team because you're a donor. So I decided to, just take advantage of that. So again, I'm sitting there, not thinking much about it. They're doing their echocardiogram, all of this stuff, and I'm thinking, my mind, man, I'm strong as an ox. And the technician, she said to me, she's like, "Hey, kind of like casually, do you have a history of heart issues in your family?" And I said, no, not really. Actually, haven't forgotten that my father had a history. Um, so didn't think much of it. She really didn't say anything else to me after that. Met with a doctor, and he said, we're seeing something interesting that your heart is at 44%. I'm like, 44%? I'm like, how? He said, there's probably sometimes there are errors around this. Let's not panic. So I went for a second opinion with a cardiologist, and he was taking notes, and he just kept saying, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He said, I think I know what's going on, but continue. But he said it so lighthearted. I think I know what's going on. Continue. And he jotted notes, and then is that everything? I said, yeah, I think that's everything. He said, well, I know what's going on here. You're suffering from systolic congestive heart failure. And I tell you, Miss Shonda, everything you like in the movies, it was like a faint echo, like in my mind. I think I missed everything else that he said after that. It's a good thing Roxanne was sitting there, because there were things like generally folks don't live past 5 years. It was like snippets. It was it was just like, and I I kept getting worse. That's the part of it. I would so at 44%, I was kind of making it. I was, just couldn't do my riding, my running, those kind of things. But then it got to the point where I would be driving to work and I felt myself almost passing out. And I'd quickly have to get over on the shoulder and just make sure that I wasn't driving while, if I were to pass out. And they kept checking, and then it was 42%, and it just kept dropping. And the last one, where I could barely stand up or sit up at that point, and again I went in, you know, to see them, and they said your heart is at 35%, and we don't know why. We don't know why, what's going on, why your heart function is dropping. So then they referred me out to advanced heart failure, because they started discussing whether I would need a pump to help pump the blood through the ventricles. At this point, I'm trying to hold on a job because I'm the single income in the household because, of course, my wife can't work. Um, and, I was blessed again to where I had some flexibility in that particular job where I was able to spend some time just working with medical teams. And, it just really got to the point where I said, I don't understand this. How can I go from being Iron Man? We were racing out there, finishing Iron Man in like 11 hours. 40 minutes. We're racing hard out there. And how do I go from that to where I can't walk from my car to my office? I'm in the parking, trying to cross the parking lot. and I have to sit down in the parking lot. Um, you know, and they said, we just don't know. And then I was having they started loading on the heart failure meds. And it was making me even sicker and sicker. And I just started getting worse and worse on the medication. And then I would tell them and they would add something else. And one of them was damaging my last remaining kidney, so it was this it was a snowball, that was just getting worse and worse. And it got to the point where I began just making notes for Roxanne for her when I pass away. Um, because and I would kind of put these in my drawer, places that I know she would find it. Any of the things that needed to make the house operate, the day, the bills, because I took care of everything. I knew everything. Um, how this was handled, the relationships we have with the banks, the mortgages, whatever, things like that. Um, because I didn't think that I was going to be alive. I was up at night, afraid to go to sleep. And I would tell her, I said, I'm so afraid to go to sleep because I don't think I'm going to wake up. So I would stay up through the night. Um, you know, so it got to the point, I think I went to see a doctor. Actually, he was in Virginia Heart, while I was going through this whole journey, because I was seeking out so many, different answers. And I remember he said to me, he says, it was an older gentleman, and he said, our doctor, and he said, I think you need to go to the Mayo Clinic because your situation is so complicated and they've seen everything. And I wrote it off because I said, how am I going to live in DC and go see doctors in Minnesota? It's impossible. Um, but I talked with Roxanne on one of those really low, bad days where I couldn't sit at the dining table anymore to eat because I just couldn't sit upright. The blood couldn't get pushed to my head. And I was laying on the couch and I said to her, you know, um, I the only thing I can think about is the Mayo Clinic, but how is that even going to work? And she said, I think we should do it. She said, God will make a way. Um, because I said, how am I going to be out there? And I said, Minnesota is not next door. So I kind of lingered still a bit because to me, it didn't make sense. So, but this is what actually pushed me. I went to see my local doctor here in DC, the team, and they became annoyed because I kept pushing for that multi-sport or just an active lifestyle. And you could tell the annoyance. It's like, stop asking about this. They didn't say that, but that's pretty much what it was. And they said, you need to accept where you are right now and appreciate and be happy for the good times. These things happen in life, but you need to just appreciate it. You were able to run, you were able to become an Ironman, you were able to do all these things, but you can't. I'm sorry.
So they're mad at you because you're trying to push for something to help you, give you an idea. Like you're pushing for something to keep you going and so that you can have something to work towards, and they were getting upset.
Right. They were getting upset.
Wow.
And I believe they even took it as being a bit ungrateful to them because I saw the other patients. Because when you're in the waiting room, you see a lot of the other patients, especially if you're going there frequently. And I think they felt like, look at where you are compared to the other patients. They at the time they had the left ventricle assistive devices. So they had the bags they were carrying that was helping to push. So it came off that way to me, and that bothered me so much that I said it gave me the push I needed, and I went to mayo.com, mayoclinic.com, and um I clicked. They make it very easy. Schedule an appointment and filled in. Didn't expect to hear back. I heard back by the next day, and they said, "Yeah, we just want to chat with you. Um, Here, if this is a case that we would be, in my words, interested in taking." And so they said, we're gonna set up a second call. We just wanted to do some preliminary gathering of information. And when I started sharing the story, I think what hit them the most is that here's a guy that donated a kidney. He was perfectly well, perfectly fine. And now he's not well, not because of that, but he's not well. We've got to do this. Um, because what I've heard is from a lot of the doctors is that, here's a person that's fully well. They're choosing they're choosing to have surgery, major surgery, to have an organ removed. So we've really this is a person that we have to look out for, but I didn't really see that here. But I saw that, with the Mayo Clinic team, and they after I told them the history and everything that was going on, they said, no, they didn't give me an answer right away. They said, we will call you back in about 3 to 5 days. And they called me back the next day and said, we'd like to let you know that we are going to take this case. Um, and it was just wonderful. They said, however, um, we won't be able to get you on the schedule for another 3 months. And I thought, I don't have 3 months. I couldn't walk from the basement to like the middle floor, if you will. Yeah. I couldn't, the stairs were too much without being out of breath. My heart rate, things were just out of whack. So I tell you, Michelle, I was like, please God, just let me. You would think that these guys were a miracle. I was just like, it's like, they were like Jesus, right? Gonna touch me,
Right, right.
Um, you would think that in my mind, that's how it was. I was just like, please God, just help me make it. And each day I woke up, I have never appreciated life so much as during these times. When I woke up, when I opened my eyes, I was like, I, 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 I was just, I'm happy to be alive because I didn't think I made it through the night. I couldn't believe it. And this happened, as time was going on, and they, but anyway, 3 months came. I was so happy, got on the plane, and tried to manage it all through the flight, got there, and immediately, they really don't play around. There's no fluff in they make you feel very special, but there's no fluff. They target things from day one you walk in. It's all about, let's get you taken care of. And they didn't make any promises. I asked them, I said, will I be able to do this again? They said, we don't know the damage that your heart had sustained. But we're going to do our best. They said, let's take a look. Because I realized that I kept asking them, will I be able to do this? Will I be able to? I told them, I said, I don't know what I'll be able to do if I can't run or try to tries anymore.
So when was that time frame where they said, yes, I want to move because there's someone who might want to say hello to you.
Okay.
So how did you get to the fact that you wanted to train again? Like they said, yes, you could train again.
Well, so that came, it was about, I would say probably about a year later. They looked at a lot of imaging and they realized that um, I was in a place um, physiologically that I could return to endurance sports, but it would have to be a very slow, careful build back. And they ensured, so they provide guidance too through that. You know, this is what you need to do. And they were specific, 1 mile, this pace, and or half a mile, whatever it was, add on a quarter mile each time. And some they wanted me to start on the treadmill because it was safest and being on the road if something were to happen. So that came about a year, or I think it was about a year later.
Okay, so you had to go through a whole year of not knowing if you could or couldn't. And then they said, let's start again. But you
Right.
did that with some help. And I have somebody who's joining who kind of helped you get on that course of action. And you talked about how you had to start and do a mile, but at this rate, this pace.
Mm.
Um, I'm going to bring in your coach,
Yes.
our coach, I
Very
should say.
instrumental.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, we got matching shirts.
I don't have a shirt. We got to work on that.
Right.
Okay. It's not about me. But yeah, so Coach Lloyd, we talked about Coach Lloyd being the other Black man on the video. We were like, what?
Right, right.
And so, Coach Lloyd, we just got to the point where we're talking about Ian can start to train again, but he's talking to his team, but it's little by little, step by step. He can only go at this pace. What was that like in terms of like taking those directions? And Ian, you guys can have like a conversation because Ian, you had to get with a coach who you could trust. Now your coach is probably having to be putting on these calls. What was this like?
So, and you know, I hope he doesn't beat me up too much on this, right? Because he always gives me like a talking to, right? But I think it's because he knows the type of athlete that I am. So you know, he was very protective. I think it was to ensure that um that the wheels didn't fall off, right? It's like we have a goal that we're trying to get to. You know, this right now isn't about um, you know, pressing the gas pedal down to the floor and seeing, you know. So um, and you know, I'll let Lloyd, you know, talk more, but I honestly I thought he was crazy, right? Because here I had I couldn't run, right? I couldn't, and here is a multi Ironman that had just come off of a race. I forgot which one he had just did, you know, 2 years ago. Um, and he said, "We can go for a run." I said, "Man," I said, "Listen, I'm just gonna slow you down. I have no benefit to you walk running, you know, but and he said to me, he's like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about, man. He said, this is where I'm at right now, you know, and so he told me come out, you know, we got on the trail, and if it was a mile, I think we may have started with a mile or 2 miles. I don't even remember, but it was a run walk, and I would, and you know, what I loved is that he didn't make me feel as if I was just messing up his run or that he wouldn't walk. He made me feel like, you know, when I needed a rest, that he also needed a rest. You know, and that I think was very encouraging for me. Um, just where I was mentally, because a part that we didn't talk about was the mental aspect, because the Mayo Clinic was also able to catch there was a deep state of depression that I got into, and they were right that no one else caught and was willing or or I guess
Oh,
recognized the treat.
we're going to get to the mental part. Just don't worry. We're getting it because I
Yeah.
think that mental piece is going to be key for a lot of athletes who go through periods of uh moments where they have to be down. So we'll go through that. But okay, go ahead
But
to
yeah,
the run.
you know, so that's how it started. You know, I think it started maybe at 2 miles, you know, with Coach Lloyd's help and guidance and just helping me remain mentally encouraged, you know, that 2 miles is okay. But when he said, this is the part I really thought that he was a little crazy. He said, my goal is for us to run this entire trail. I said, oh, how long is the trail? He said about 14 miles. I said, okay, he's now lost his mind. I'm done. I'm done with this guy.
Did you guys get to the 14 miles?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. It it was beyond belief. I believe that day, I think I sat in the car. You know, it was emotional. It was everything because I remember where we started. I think we've done 2 loops of it, I want to say, or something like that. You know, I think not too far, or 1.5 or something. Um, but when I started, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. But one thing that I can say, and it's not just because he's sitting here, is that everything that he has told me, I have been able to accomplish.
Mm,
So I think having faith, Now, if he didn't have a good track record, I'm like, oh my goodness. But so I said, all right, he must see something that and he still does that with me now. I'm like, Lloyd, I can't ride like that. I can't do this. He's like, dude, what are you talking about? You're doing it. So, but it's very important to have that coach, that friend, that's able to see beyond your own limitations or doubts, lack of confidence in yourself and belief, all of that. Because I tell you, I'm still not there, but I'm trying to get there with his help. So, but yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to share, Lloyd.
No, I think you nailed it. I think one of the key aspects when we first started, once we had a conversation about what your physicians had in mind, what their expectations were, what the parameters were, it was just setting new goals based on that input. So the days of just going out and doing whatever without any consequences and saying, hey, even if the wheels come off the bus, so what? We
Right,
couldn't
right,
couldn't really work in that space anymore. So, I think we came to an understanding where the goal was no flare-ups.
right.
So, regardless of whatever was on the schedule, whatever the workload was, none of that mattered. The only thing that really, really mattered on the journey was making sure that there were no health complications as a result of the training. So if
Hmm.
more rest days, if that means pulling back on the training, then that's what we had to do, which, from Ian's background, pulling back was going to be a hard task to kind of get him to, buy into, because again, before we would just go all in. And if the wheels came off the bus, that was the fun. Like, okay, so
Right,
what?
right, right. It was the fun. Oh my goodness. I think we weren't satisfied.
The wheels back on. But this time it's like we didn't have that. So we had to redefine, what fun would be, how to approach it, and pretty much getting his buy-in. Because again, he's going back to, what motivated him 7, 8 years ago, what got him up to now. You don't get that same feeling immediately when you're, pulling your punches on
Right,
a bike ride. And it's like, well, how do I keep you from having to go to the hospital, or
right.
passing out on this trail, and I've got to carry you out of this trail? Because if something like that happens, it's just going to be so much of a setback that it would just kind of, make you even not believe you could even do it. So I think once we establish that as, you know, our version of success is going to be defined by never having a flare up through the training process, that's a win.
Hmm.
Then we now plan out, okay, here's a nice progression. So,
Yeah,
I think even, first year we didn't have the conversation about triathlon. First year was,
right.
let's get back to running. Can you even run? Because, marathoning was his first thing before
Yeah,
triathlon. So it was like, okay, let's just take this year, or starting January 1, and start to run. I think, like he said, it was probably like 2 miles, if that. 2 miles.
yeah. If that.
I think we kind of probably walked around the parking lot of the neighborhood, make sure that, the Strava came up to 2, maybe.
Man, oh, that's right. See, he has a better memory about this than I. That's exactly right. I think we had to walk around.
You had to walk a little bit just to be like, all right, we're not going to stop at less than 2, and not have it on Strava. But
Right.
after that, it was like, okay, we're just going to keep adding on a little bit, a little bit. And the good thing is we did it on the trail, because I knew, um, we had to have an approach that he couldn't compare it to anything else from the past,
Hmm.
and couldn't have metrics to truly judge.
Yeah.
He did it on the track like we used to run on the track. If we did road runs on all the familiar areas, then he'd have a whole set of numbers from his training log to say, apples to apples, here's what I used to do, here's what I'm doing now. And
Yeah.
I knew that would be hard. So, by taking a route he'd never done on a trail, the numbers were so skewed that there's nothing to compare it to.
Right.
I think we were doing probably like 15, 16-minute miles, which
Oh
was
yeah.
for obscene numbers, super. But you know, by the time we actually got onto the road, we realized like, those 14, 15, 16-minute miles translated into 7 and 8 minute miles in the real world,
Hmm.
but without any of the pressure of trying to run 7, 8 minute miles. So, he couldn't sabotage his training because
Right.
it was, a lot slower than expected. But again, we were getting all the good benefits of training without any of the downside.
Hmm.
By the time the year was out, I think we finally did, our first full loop of the trail, which was great. And then, of course, sometime later was like, well, let's up it. Let's do 20 miles,
Right.
and got him to his first 20-mile run. And
Hmm.
So
got once we got 20 miles, then we had the conversation of, now let's talk about triathlon.
Right.
interesting. So you like played a psychological trick on him that he didn't know he was being a part of.
I wouldn't say it was a trick. It was just, with all athletes, you got to know what motivates them, how they work, how they function, how they're going to process information so that, they can work with the program versus everything else. And again, he already had a lot of doubts
Yeah.
about the ability to get it done, period.
Yes.
So we're starting new. We just had to go all new.
I
It-
love
Nothing,
that
nothing that was
approach.
too familiar.
Right. I love that approach because so often you have people who kind of web in and out of the sport, like they take some time off for whatever reasons, and I'm gonna be a part of this group, often compare ourselves to our old selves,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and you gotta compare yourself to where you are today. Like you can't compare it. That just kind of hit me in the soul in a different way. And is that the approach that you will tell people to take so that they don't compare themselves? That's my
Well,
question for you. But then for Ian, my question for you is how hard was it to not compare yourself to your old self? So we'll take Lloyd's first and then go to you.
it depends. Sometimes again, um, if our goal wasn't about, not having flare-ups, right? But it was just him getting back in, we could have used old metrics. We could have used the plans and numbers from previous to say, hey, how did this season stack up with last season? How am I training going? What are my benchmarks? So, in some situations, yes, I like to use what you did last year, so you can have an apples to apples comparison to just see how you're doing against yourself. Sometimes that's good. But when you're taking years off, then you may have to readjust that perspective. Because again, 5 years away from the sport, 3 or 4 years away, 10 years, age creeps in, even if it's not a health issue.
Mhm.
And, where you were at 30 isn't where you're at 40, 40 isn't where you're at 50. So
Right.
looking at those old logs, you know, can sometimes be like a albatross around your neck, just pulling you down because you're thinking about, when I was 20, this is what I used to do. Now you're a lot older. So, you just have to use the right approach depending on the situation. So it's not one or the other, it's which is the best for this situation.
Yeah. And for me, um, I think the question was, how hard was it, right, to not compare myself to my numbers to the previous. So it was so the approach that Lloyd took with us being on the trails, there was no real way. I thought the numbers looked ridiculous, but then in my mind, I was like, there's mud, there are roots, there are rocks, there are leaves. It's just kind of gross out there sometimes. So we had to slow down. Um, I had some anxiety of wanting to always, okay, this is what it looks like on the trails. What does it really look like on the road? But I also knew within myself at the time that if the answer wasn't right, not what I expected it to look like, I wouldn't be able to deal with it. So I stayed away from that. Even, not secretly running. I say, I'm not gonna tell Lloyd, but go. I wouldn't because I I don't think I could have dealt with the answer at that point. Um, I was thinking back as Lloyd was talking, about that, how so a friend that so as he mentioned, I was marathoning, running, that was my thing before triathlon. And a friend had recently signed up for the Cherry Blossom. They're about to do it. And they I didn't realize that you could still look at old results. And he apparently had looked mine up and he's like, man, and here I am, right? Still not feeling well. And he goes, man, Ian, he said, oh my goodness, you ran the Cherry Blossom at a sub 7 pace. But he viewed it as like, kind of lifting me up. But it actually hit me pretty hard because in my mind I kept saying, those days are gone. That's not it was I felt less at the time. Now I'm actually beyond that. I'm in this great place of acceptance, like whatever the numbers are, I'm just happy to be back out here. My hands are like, woo, I'm glad to be back out. Just being so grateful. Um, but it was difficult at the start. And I was making those little baby steps, building and I remember and I was just there thinking, like, man, you know, it had hit me. It hit me pretty much, when that friend said that, unknowingly. But we're at a point right now where, when we go out there and run, whatever it is, I actually have a good laugh at it. I think it's very funny now, which is because they just look, sometimes the numbers look silly, and I'm in this, as I said, this great place of, hey, this is what it is right now. And it could have been zero where I'm on a bed or not even alive.
I think one of the key things that kind of clicked for Ian is when he saw that the numbers translated. So
Oh,
I,
true.
I think once that first year when we were running, um, after probably about 2 or 3 months, I had a race, and we had done the exact same training up to that point from the beginning of the year through my event and nothing else. So when I went and did my race and I came back with the numbers that I came back, that's when I think he kind of was like, okay, fully bought in. I
Right.
don't doesn't have to worry about the numbers because he saw that even though the numbers were crazy on the trail, when put in the real world, they actually translated really, really, really well. So I think at that point it started kind of like, oh, okay,
All right. This is
I may not
real.
say, but uh, it can happen, it will happen, as long as you just kind of, not have any flare-ups and trust the process. But getting
Yeah.
that external validation of seeing how, the training was working for someone else and he could have
Hmm.
that data point, I think that kind of let his guard down a little bit.
No, it's true. Right, because when Lloyd came back and he was telling me his results, I said, wait, did you do track work? Did you do this? He's like, nope. He said, dude, I'm just doing what we're doing out here. I'm like, how is that even possible? How can you get faster by running slower, on the trails? But he's right. It actually did, my confidence got a boost there and said, all right, this is possible. This is possible.
That reminds me of the quote I've been seeing a lot lately, and I'm not sure if it's just the way the algorithm is talking to me, but go slow in order to go fast. I keep
Right.
seeing that. Like, I can't get out of it. I'm reading this book on discipline, and he talks about it in the book. And so, and then I see it in my Instagram feed. And so, what you're saying is that in order to get faster, sometimes you have to slow down. Do you think that's applicable for all areas of life?
I would say, I mean, that's a very good question. Yes. And, I heard it recently. um, from one of my kids, interestingly enough. Um, he said, when you go fast, you make a lot of mistakes. You end up having to redo. I think it was something that we were doing. Um, and it's it's not a good use of time. And I was like, wow, there's a teenager, giving me life's counsel. But it is. And I believe that that is part of what happened, with me on even the mental part of this journey. It was, it was going out there, pushing us hard, doing all of these things, and when I was forced to slow down, and step back and look, and we were saying when we were just chatting earlier, it's how much gain there was, the lessons that uh, we stepped away with. So yeah, I think it is, for all aspects of life, um, going slower, taking your time a bit, um, to gain the benefits.
I mean, one of the things we refer to a lot in swimming is slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Mm,
So, sometimes you just got to take your time to figure things out. And while you're doing that, everything comes together so that, on race day or that big event, you can go fast.
hmm
Mhm.
Yep.
I feel like that's a I have thoughts about that patient lead hand. I feel some type of way about it. But I do want to hit this. And you actually had an opportunity to have two first time races. Your
Ah,
first race in 2012 and your first race back in 2024, and coached by the same person.
hmm
And so let's talk about it's hard to compare and contrast the two because they were two different sections, and we will get to the mental aspect probably when Coach Lloyd jumps off. But I want to talk about first training again for the first time while we have him for Ironman California, and that being your first race back. Like
hmm
you went from slip disc in 2018, your wife getting sick, you given a kidney, you having congestive heart failure, to not thinking you would be able to walk again, to starting over at a mile to 2 miles, going in the river and through the woods to grandmother's house on this
hmm
journey of rediscovering running and redefining what that is for you, to now being ready to train for your first
hmm
Ironman back. What was that like for both of you? Because from the coach's aspect, but then also from the athletic, from you, the athlete.
So um, I had a lot of doubts, about being able to do this. Um, Lloyd, I, well, no, no, he had the belief in me and believed that I could. But I really, and this is something that I admit that I need to work on too. I just figured that they were both just being very encouraging and supportive. But it's not realistic. You can't wing 140.6 miles, no matter how you cut it. So, um, I remember sitting, I remember this so clearly. I was sitting at the dining table. It was a Saturday night, and I had the registration for Ironman California up. I had everything completed, but I was so afraid to click the submit. And Roxanne was off to my left. She was watching TV, and I asked her, I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this." And she thought I'd already done it because, we had this conversation so many times. And she's like, yeah, yeah. I said, "Do you really think I can do this?" She's like, "Absolutely." I mean, she didn't hesitate. Um, And I said, "Ugh." So I was still sitting there, and I want to say honestly, I think the page didn't time out on me, or maybe I don't even remember, but I was still sitting there afraid to spend the money, to commit the money, off of some whim bad decision. But I asked her again. I looked over and I said, "Hey, sorry to keep interrupting you," because she was in the middle of her program. I said, "So I'm gonna go ahead and register for this thing." I said, and she's like, "Yeah, absolutely." She said, "I know you can do it." And I went ahead and I said, "You know what? I'll just have to figure a way of making this money back if I throw it out the window," and I just registered, and I immediately I took a picture and a screenshot and I sent it to Lloyd, and he didn't have any doubts either. He was excited about it, because he had encouraged me to choose California as opposed to where I wanted to go, um, and I think I remember, and I'm trying to remember, Coach, did we say at that point how we're going to start the coaching from that point? I can't remember.
Yep, yep. So I'll circle back to the start of your question, Mashonda. Um, he was in two different places as a beginner for the first one and the comeback. For his first attempt at the distance, um, it was it wasn't a matter of endurance, it was a matter of technique. So that first time around, it was, how do I get your technique in the swim and the bike where they need to be? Because he's already a runner. So how do we get the swim and the bike technique work up to par so that you can even make a good attempt of getting off of the bike and now letting yourself shine on the run, which you're already good at? So all of the doubt that first time around was just on figuring out technique, building up that stamina, that endurance, and all the doubts that most first timers have of just building up to that point. So how we approached it was all technique work at the pool, figuring that out so that the swim, wasn't challenging or hard. And then spending a lot of time building up the cycling base, since long course is nothing but a road race. So spending a lot of time building up that, where it's, several hundred milers, every other weekend almost. It was, we're going to go out and do 100 miles, or, something crazy like that, or back-to-back weekends, and then allowing the run to, come together, because there was never a doubt. So that's the approach for the first time. Second time, he's already had the foundation of good swim technique, riding, having that together, but it's, how do I keep my systems all running well and not falling apart, even though I have the skills for it? And then, actually going from not having that endurance, not having that base, to gradually building it up over time to get to that place where, okay, I can keep going for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours or more on a swim, a bike, or a run, and it doesn't feel too bad. So I think lots of questions of self-doubt came up in both cases, first time and second first time. But they were now, dueling each other, because, like, yes, I've done it already, but can I get back there? Versus, I've never done it at all. It's a complete unknown. It's
Right.
more, will my, can I trust my body to do what I know it was capable of? So, training, our focus on training was really catered to those two different issues that were at play, because we didn't do much technique work this round. I mean,
Oh, that's true.
it was all right, everything already. It's just, how do we just gradually build it up. So that's kind of, I think, the difference between, the first time, and, coming back first time.
hmm
Mm.
Yeah.
So technique versus What was the last thing you said, Coach Lloyd?
Uh, it was technique, but in the second time, it was really just building up that endurance and making sure that his body would perform the way it should now that he has all of that technique. So making sure it doesn't fall apart and that he can actually trust it.
Okay.
Right.
So the building of the technique, how did that work knowing that you were under strict guidelines from doctors?
Well, the
Oh,
technique already had the
yeah.
technique.
Well, no, not the tech. I'm saying like the in building the endurance again, because you had these strict guidelines that you had to work within.
No flare-ups.
Right. So we would, I, and I tell you, Mashana, it was, I mean, with precision, we were out there because there were times. So initially, I remember there were runs. Uh, excuse me. You know, I was in a different place too after acceptance. Like things were funny to me, which was a good thing. So, uh, because when you're not, at least I'll say, when you're not trying to necessarily hit a number hard, and you feel like you're trying to make pro or whatever it is, it becomes more fun. So I remember this one particular run. Lloyd, he took me along this course. I think we might have been on the road, and somehow we end up at the bottom of a hill. And he told me that the way back was up this hill, and I was just laughing. But to your question, about halfway up the hill, I started having skip beats, and it was I was going through these moments of frustration, because I think it was total of like a 7 mile run. And but the heart, I think, was working too hard. It hadn't worked that hard in a long time, consistently hard. Because in the trails we were, a lot of times we were walking those inclines, but I think we were just trying to have a little fun with it, see if we could jog up this thing. Um, but the great thing is that the Mayo Clinic team was always accessible, readily accessible. So it's one of those where you send a message in a portal, you email them, you call, and they make the time for you. So I told them about that, and it was simple in their minds that when you feel that you stop and you essentially allow your body, your heart to recover, then you move on. So, as they said to me, remember, you're not in it to win it. Um, so that's it was, we had little hiccups initially, but for the most part, we were just patient through the process, knowing that um, the body will adjust, which is something that the medical team had said to me. It said, remember, you hadn't done this in 7 years. It's going to take some time. So it's just understanding that it is a process.
All right. Coach Lloyd, it's a process. I'm sure those are words you love to hear. It's a process. So I'm gonna let you close out with whatever you do, and then we're actually okay, I'm gonna let you close out with the process. What do you have to say?
So again, congratulations. It's just amazing to see the journey, how everything went. Like you said, it's definitely trusting the process. You got to work with people who uh, you trust and who know you, so that when they ask you to push, you can push. When they tell you to pull back, you trust that, yeah, this person tell me to pull back, I believe that I should pull back, versus you just kind of disregard their advice because you're not sure that they relate to whatever it is you're going through at that point. Um, and then again, I had access to the training data. So, even when he wasn't sure, I could see how much power he was pushing on the watts on the trainer. And I could see that, everything was moving the way we wanted to go.
Right.
Even if it had no outside real world correlation, I could tell from the runs, the swims, the bikes, what they would translate to when we put them all together. So even though he wasn't sure, when he thought I was just giving him confidence, I could give him confidence because I could read the tea leaves and see, if these things add up, this is where it's going to go, even if, that's not where his focus is. So again, you got to just trust the process, and just kind of work towards that goal. And I'm just super excited to see what you put on the schedule next. Always intrigued what crazy ideas you can come up with and figuring out a way to help you get there.
Oh man, and I appreciate it. It is to Lloyd's final point about just having someone there you can trust. Trust, but also the patience. Because I tell you, I asked them the same questions countless times. And he answered them every time. We're out there in the woods, and the whole time I'm like, man, how am I going to run 26.2 miles? I'm already tired out here. And in addition to just just being out there with me, motivating me, the patience was great. He could have easily said, I don't know how many times I'm going to tell. I mean, he did, but it was funny. It was in humor. I don't know how many times I'm going to tell you this. But it was good because I had a lot of fear. I had a lot of fear going into uh, Ironman California. Just a lot of self-doubt. I didn't think I was going to finish at all. And not, yes, some of it was from a medical perspective, but I just didn't think, I had it in me. I was down that path of, man, you're washed up. This stuff isn't, you can't do this.
And I think this is a perfect time to say we are going to come back with a part 2, because we got to transition. He's already doubting himself. So we want to come back in and try to figure out the mental part of it, because triathlon is not just about the physical. It is a huge mental portion of it. So with that said, we're going to come back. I'm feeling generous. It's the holiday season. It's December. So I'm going to give you guys a part 2, which will come out a few days after this episode. So be sure to tune in because this will come out on the Friday after. So with that said, we're out for just now, but we'll be back with part 2. Peace, everybody. Thank you, Coach Lloyd.
All right, guys.
Okay. All right, thank you. Bye. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode. We need your help so we can continue to try at TBL. So for more information on where you can find and subscribe to this podcast, visit www.trybeginnersluck.com. And don't forget, whenever you try Beginner's Luck, you always win.